We all know that Squad is about to undergo a massive change in terms of how the game is played. The upcoming Infantry Overhaul, along with recent updates, is really going to shift our approach and how we play round to round. And I have some thoughts on what that approach might be moving forward. So hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts on what you think about these changes and where this game is headed. First, we need to take a quick look at recent updates that I think all play into what's happening with the game and the direction it's headed. In Update 4.5, various emplacement prices were dropped in terms of how much logistical build they need to actually create those emplacements. And it's not limited to things providing cover. In fact, it's also including HMG bunkers or HMG emplacements. This is not suggesting you build a super fob. However, it can be important to utilize some of these emplacements in certain situations. Sometimes you just need a little bit of cover or an HMG bunker to watch your flank. Sometimes just a little bit can go a long way in protecting a defensive position. It obviously just depends on how it's utilized. But with cost changes of up to 50%, you're going to see these show up more in the battlefield. But this is most certainly a buff to defense, giving you options to help create cover and other emplacements that can provide a little bit of support when you're trying to hold a position. The next thing is ticket bleed. Ticket bleed has been removed from all random advance and search layers. As of update 4.3, the only ticket bleed that should exist is a mercy bleed when all flags have been capped by one team. Also in 4.3, they removed the 10 ticket loss when a flag is capped. So with removing that, that means if you lose points, you're not losing 10 tickets, and this was meant to help balance the game. As you're getting pushed back, you're probably losing other things like infantry, vehicles, and maybe fobs that cost up to 20 tickets. So now you're not penalized just for losing a point. However, you still are up against the fact that the opposing team gains tickets for capping your flag. While a ticket bleed of -1 wasn't that drastic of a change and didn't necessarily alter the game very heavily all the time, it did tend to force your team to feel like they needed to advance and make an adjustment to their positioning and potentially try to push a point. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that with inexperienced players, it would tend to rush their process, leading to mistakes, especially around fob placement or creation. It was often a psychological problem more so than anything else. This is another defensive buff because it allows you to not have to advance far beyond where you might want to go. If you want to stay on a second point, or if you have to fall back to the second point, you're able to hold there without penalty. Now back in update 4.2, they changed something that's kind of significant and plays both ways. The increased hab spawn activation delay from 20 to 30 seconds, meaning it takes longer from when you put your hab down to it getting constructed and actually being functional. Now this obviously affects both those who are attacking and defending. However, for attackers, it's often in a situation where you're working behind enemy lines, and getting that hab up for respawns is critical, especially the speed at which you do it. So while that's significant, there's also a tweak to where you can proxy a hab from. And if you're new to the game and you don't know what that means, essentially you can get within range of an enemy spawn, and if you have enough troops in a certain range, you can basically disable the spawn. And proxying hab is simply based off proximity. Nothing having to do with shoveling anything down or destroying an enemy emplacement. Now this tends to work both ways, but if you have a really good defensive group set up, they can typically react to an enemy hab relatively quickly, especially if they hear the vehicle or a helicopter approaching. So with the hab delay, it's going to take a longer amount of time for you to get reinforcements on a position, and ultimately it could be proxied before it's ever actually operational. Whereas on defense, it allows attackers to proxy your hab from a little bit further away, giving them some advantage of getting into position and stopping your defensive position from being able to reinforce. In addition to updating the proxy area within 4.4, they also updated the fob bleed out time. They upped it to 75 seconds and decreased health required for a fob to stop bleeding to 50. So now if a fob is damaged to the point of bleeding out, it's going to take longer for that to go down. Secondly, it takes a little bit more work to pick it back up. I think this affects both sides a little bit more equally. However, it does require infantry to be off of objective, ensuring that the radio is repaired or guarded. In my opinion, this continues to be a little bit of a buff for defense. Assuming you have multiple habs, different squads, and maybe rallies in an area, you're able to have more time to react to a fob going down. Whereas if you're attacking, you may be extending your force or projecting your force to a certain part of the map that is further away from your main, ending up and causing a little bit of a slowdown in logistics and habs and things being placed. That few seconds extra that you need to guard a bleeding radio as an attacking team, you can't really spend it leaving it because the enemy team could save it, self-destruct it, instead of being able to go ahead and push the objective. It just slows things down a little bit. We recently got update 4.3, which brought on a militia faction that had been reworked with new emplacements and new fortifications that made them a very strong defensive team. What's so interesting about this is this faction released, and then several months later we got update 5.0. with 2 new factions, including the Plan MC and the Russian Airborne Forces. Both of these factions rely heavily on mobility, along with having amphibious capability. It can really move across the map differently than some of the traditional forces. Their capability lends themselves to being played differently than some of your other factions. So how does the Infantry Overhaul play into this? Well, first, with scoping ADS, it's meant to slow down gunfights, make them a little bit more deliberate. You have to plan a little further ahead. With character movement, it's slowing overall character speed and also reducing stamina, and then there's a higher focus on how stamina plays into ADSing in general. Then you have suppression, which is becoming a much more effective tool, especially for vehicles, and the reliance on different kits to help suppress enemy positions to attack or defend. So by default, I think the Infantry Overhaul immediately suits defense first. And the basic reasons for that are, if you're not moving, you're not using stamina. If you have stamina, you have a better ability to ADS with the Infantry Overhaul. So if you're not having to make an advance, you have a natural advantage in the gunfight, whereas an attacking squad may be utilizing stamina to cross fields or get into cover. This, coupled with slower movement speed and reduced stamina, creates another issue in terms of you being able to not move there as quickly. And finally, you have suppression. Suppression allows you to just lay down fire, and because it's so effective with the Infantry Overhaul, someone at a defensive stance can actually lay down fire and cover a whole field and keep your infantry force from being able to advance very quickly or effectively. Now, there's a little bit more to this, but let's just consider that the majority of this video has been focused on how defense can be a really key position to hold once the Infantry Overhaul is in place with the updates that we've seen recently to Squad. Not that it's not significant now, but I do see situations where a lot of folks in a public server may not even want to play defense, so you often leave points available for attack. But now all of these sort of mistakes are going to be so heightened because attacking is going to be more difficult. So we already know defense is important and it's going to be heightened, but what is the flip side of this argument? What do attackers need to do to be effective on the battlefield? And I think it's pretty simple. It's mechanized infantry. Mech infantry is obviously something you can already do in the game, much like playing defense. But frankly, I feel like it's underutilized a lot of the time. Now, more advanced players will typically do this. They'll use infantry fighting vehicles to maneuver infantry around and attack positions or HABs. But there's so many times that I see armor fighting other armor. They go out and they seek armor fights, leaving infantry without armor and armor without infantry support. As a squad lead, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked for infantry support near a vehicle that's been damaged because of an armor fight when we have no infantry nearby and we can't support it because we can't get there. So instead of playing armor and infantry sort of siloed on their own, I think all of these updates push for these to be more integrated. Not only does an IFV provide cover for your infantry and better mobility, it also is going to allow the IFV to apply suppression as your infantry is moving in. It gives you the ability to also rearm your infantry. So if the IFV is picking you up from one objective to move you to another, you can rearm your troops, and also squad leads can regain a rally to place down at the next objective. That infantry group no longer has to worry about walking the line from point to point. Instead, they can maneuver around using the IFV. And with the Infantry Overhaul changes alone, it's going to be important that you do utilize different maneuvers, not just running straight at a point, instead of flanking and working on different positions to attack from. This will allow infantry to get in a better position to fight, because if you're just dropping them off in the heat of the battle, they're probably going to get wiped out. If your IFV can stay in good health and in a good position close to the infantry, AT can support it and keep it up and running against other armor. Not to mention that the infantry can also provide additional intel to keep the armor informed of vehicles approaching. And it is critical for the infantry to help the armor and vice versa, because keeping both together, you are really exponentially increasing your ability to push objectives and to fight. I think there's one additional thing that these updates are all leaning towards, and I'm kind of excited for it because it's a role I play pretty often, and that is for the commander role. Now, it may not seem like a huge upgrade because the assets they use are already pretty handy, but that UAV, for example, is going to be really critical to help gain intel. Intel is king when it comes to positioning in this game. But because attacking can be so much more difficult, you're going to have to utilize these assets to help your pushes, especially mech infantry. Because if you do have an SL that can place down a rally behind enemy lines or off on a flank, they may be able to harass the enemy position for long enough for the rest of your force to move in. Or maybe you need to use that UAV in order to locate an enemy HAB that they can proxy by moving the vehicle into position full of infantry. As soon as they dismount, the HAB is proxied, then you can start making an advance with a higher chance of success. Not to mention you still have artillery and an airstrike. But timing these well for a push, I think, is going to be significant. Because with the cost of emplacements dropping, you tend to see more of these on the battlefield. You may need these assets to help clear a path for your infantry to push in. Likewise, on defense, the commander assets are going to be important to figure out where pushes are coming from and how to deflect those pushes utilizing those assets that the commander possesses. With how firefights are trending in the direction of being a little bit slower and more methodical, I think you're going to see more things through a UAV's perspective in terms of how you can attack or slow down a push. However, I think you're also going to see infantry find different ways of infiltrating because they're not going to want to run straight at the gunfire. Instead, they may be using vehicles to help get them into position and maneuver around you, leaving your defense point highly susceptible to mech infantry assaults. I think this conversation is really interesting. I like projecting where I think things are going to go in squad with these updates and how they all work together. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button and leave a comment down below. What are you thinking about the update and how is this going to affect how you or maybe your friends play the game together? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.